Welcome back to my channel. We are recapping the Gilded Age Season 3, Episode 4. This one is all about Gladys and that wedding that nobody wants to see. We've unlocked a new character. Monica is my new favorite girl. We meet the Duke's salty sister, Lady Sarah. George has some financial woes. JP Morgan's not fooling with him no more. Unfortunately, Peggy's still dealing with that old ornery Claire Huxtable up in Newport. And Jack finally sold his clock and he is officially rich. So we are happy for that. But let's go into the details and let's talk more about this wedding. So last week we ended with Gladys agreeing to marry the Duke. But we could tell that there was still tension when they revealed her photo. And everybody was staring at her and clapping. You could see the tension and the anxiety, and her pearls started to break off. So clearly she was not all the way in with it. But when we start the episode this week, we see that she's in her room and she's not coming downstairs. It seems like it's her final act of defiance and digging her heels in, reminding her mom and everybody else that she doesn't want to do this. To the point that Bertha can't get her to come in her room, so she calls Marion from across the street. Marion is now a bridesmaid because somebody was sick and had to drop out. Marion goes over there and talks to her and tells her, you know, you're about to have a wonderful life. This will give you opportunity. I know of weddings that started off arranged and they turned out beautifully. And I know of people who were gaga in love and ended up hating each other. So you just don't know. I was a little surprised that Marion gave her that advice because I thought that Marion was on her side and was unhappy about this, knowing how much it hurt her. But for some reason, Marion convinces her that she should do it. And Gladys seems to take a little bit of what she said and absorb some of it. But she still doesn't want to do it. Meanwhile, we meet a new character who I think is going to be my favorite. Monica, Bertha's sister. We don't know anything about Bertha's past. We know that she didn't grow up with means. But beyond that, I don't know where she's from. I don't know who her siblings are. I don't know where she met George. We don't know, but we do meet her sister. And her sister Monica is a pleasure because you can tell that she enjoys sticking it to her sister. And Bertha deserves this, especially this season. All the things that she's done and the way she's mistreated Gladys. And I mean, she's got a lot of shenanigans. She's been doing things since season 1, a lot of antics, but she was the underdog. So we kind of rooted for her. But now that she's come up and we see that how she's wielding her power, I don't think too many people are fans anymore. So when we see Monica comes in and starts giving it to her, I think it's enjoyable for everybody. Monica lives up in Albany. You can tell she's, average. She doesn't come from a lot of money. She doesn't have a lot. You can tell by her clothing. This is a source of embarrassment to Bertha. The fact that Monica is there is embarrassing for her. Now, Larry and Gladys invited her as their way of sticking it to their mom because she clearly didn't want her there. She doesn't want anybody to know about her past. She wants everybody to think it all started the day that she showed up on that avenue in that beautiful house on the corner. But clearly she has a past and it feels like now we're going to learn a little bit more about it. So her sister shows up. And Bertha is noticeably uncomfortable with it. She encouraged her to change her clothes because she doesn't want to be embarrassed. And Monica's like, nope, I'm fine. I got one dress. I got 2 dresses. I'm going to wear these. And so Bertha, with her conniving self, works with Church to finagle a coffee cup so that the handle breaks and she spills coffee on her dress. Therefore, she has to change. But before she does so, she has the opportunity to take a couple of shots at the Duke's sister. Now, the Duke's sister, Lady Sarah, is there with them at dinner, and she's very prickly. And some people could just chalk it up to that English dry personality thing that people say that they have. But it's something deeper than that. She's not happy about this. She seems like she believes that they are beneath her. She doesn't seem to be happy about the marriage. And I think the dynamics between her and her brother are very interesting. Now, folks online have been wondering about the true nature of their relationship, if they're even brother and sister, because she seems a little protective. And when Monica asked about her family. Her sister asked about the sister's husband and children. She said that she's not married and that's why she lives in the manor. And so then Monica says, oh, so will you be moving out? And so she seems shocked, like, well, no, why would I move out? And then she looks at the Duke, Hector, and he's like, I hadn't even thought about that. So clearly there's something going on. I mean, it's not uncommon for an unmarried woman to live in a home with her brother, which was probably their parents' home until she goes and she gets married. But there was something weird about it that went on. And people are even wondering if that's his sister, if they got something going on, if, you know, he's in fact gay and Gladys has a beard. There's a lot to unpack here and we don't know, but this is not a typical brother-sister relationship, and I believe that we are going to learn there's a lot more going on behind the scenes that is not above board. Later on, right before they get married, when they're at the altar, you see Sarah standing there with Hector and she tells him, try not to laugh. That's another thing. Well, what do you mean by that? Like, is this a joke? Is this a scam? What's going on that it's just giving that this is not his true intention? Like, he clearly, we know he's marrying her for the money, but it seems like there's another reason going on. And there was also a quick scene when they were having dinner and he says that he has to leave and he has to drop his sister off to her cousin's house. So it begs the question, well, if that's your sister, then that's y'all cousin. So why would you say her cousin? I don't know if that was a slip up. I don't know if I just didn't hear it correctly, but I'm just putting all the pieces together. Something about these two is not right. So later we see George and Bertha upstairs talking, and he still has a lot of misgivings about this, as he should, because he truly let his daughter down. I don't expect anything from Bertha at this point. We know who she is. She's a social climber. I don't believe that she loves her kids. I think they are resources to her, and she's just leveraging them to get what she wants in this world, unfortunately. I do, however, believe that George does love his children, and that's why I'm surprised that he allowed Bertha to do this, because while I understand she runs the household, you know, he's the head, she's the neck, all of that, George is not a sucker. He's not a pushover, and he controls the wallet. So this would not have happened if he did not agree to give the dowry to the Duke. We know what this is about. It's all about the money, not only how much money, but just the fact that this is an exchange. I don't know why George is okay with that and why he allowed this to go as far as it did, but he has. And he shares his misgivings with Bertha. And of course, you know, she's just blowing him off and talking about how this is a great opportunity. They talk about the coffee incident, and when he says how it was unfortunate that the cup broke and that Monica's dress was ruined, or that, you know, the coffee was spilled on her, Bertha says, well, you know, it wasn't hot. And that's when he realizes that she did this, that, you know, she conspired with Church to do this. And he's like, really? And he's like, you know, like, what's really good with you? And she's like, well, the dress was atrocious and people were going to know, and blah, blah, blah. And slowly but surely, he's starting to see her for who she is. I think in the beginning, he recognized that they were both shrewd. They both were ambitious, and he liked that about her. It probably turned him on, and it seemed like they were a power couple and they were a unit. But I believe that he's starting to realize that she's taking this too far, and she's doing it at the expense of their family. And she's also being disrespectful. Being disrespectful by going behind his back, by brokering that deal with the Duke without telling him, by planting things in the newspaper, by doing what she did with the dress. And when he tells her that, you know, he still doesn't feel good about this, she tells him that he needs to go to bed and he can wake up sensible. So the disrespect is starting to boil up. And while I believe that George loves Bertha and he allows her, he gives her a lot of license to be her and to do what she does, I think it's starting to wear on him, and he's realizing that he's going to have to reel her in. So this situation with Gladys, I believe, is going to create a rift between the two of them. It's also coupled with his financial situation. George is extremely successful, wealthy man, and he's trying to expand his business. He wants to move into the railroad industry, as we've seen, and he's running into some problems. And he had some financial backers who started to back out once the bank crisis began. And JP Morgan was one of the last ones, and he pulled out. He told him on the day of Gladys's wedding that he's out. This is not looking good. they could all lose their money here, and he needs to quit while the getting is good. But of course, George won't. And he's doubling down, and he believes that he's going to be able to find money elsewhere, and he's going to make this happen. Now, I don't doubt that he has some tricks up his sleeve. He's crafty, savvy, all those things. However, this is a warning. I feel like we're seeing the beginning of the end, or at least the beginning of a downfall for him as it relates to money. You know, we also still have to revisit this idea of the dowry, because, you know, he was negotiating with the Duke. And then when that didn't work out, he took that dowry money and he was to put that towards one of his investments. But then when it turned around and the Duke accepted his offer, well, where's that money coming from? So not only do you have this money that you owe that we don't know where it exists, because it sounds like, you know, you put it to you reallocated it, but now you're also having these financial woes and your partners are backing out. So the writing is on the wall. Things are about to start to crumble around him. And while clearly that's not all Bertha's fault, but she's playing a part. She's kind of culpable with the expense for the dowry and the expense for the wedding and all the other money that she spent. And, you know, up until now, he's indulged her and let her be. And maybe because there was so much money, it didn't matter. But now that things are starting to get a little tight, I'm curious to see how he's going to react with her. And then you couple this with her antics, and I'm seeing the potential for some trouble in paradise. So Gladys is still in her room. Things are moving on, business as usual. Everybody's planning. Bertha decides to go ahead to the church. Let me stop real quick. What did y'all think about Bertha's dress? I was underwhelmed because she really puts it together. Her designs have been glamorous since the beginning of the show. I was underwhelmed for the mother of the bride dress. And maybe she did that on purpose so she wouldn't, no, she don't care about outshining her daughter. She don't care about her daughter. So I don't know. I just didn't love the dress. So we see everybody's in the room. And again, like I told you before, I love these moments when all the characters are in one room. You know, it's like the wedding of the year. Bertha made sure. We have Ada and Agnes there. We have, obviously, Marion is going to be in the wedding. We see Mrs. Winterton. We haven't seen her in a while. Remember, she was Bertha's old maid, and then she came on to George, and then she got fired, and she married that old man, and she re-entered society. So she's there. She sees Mrs. Fish. Mrs. Fish asks about her husband. And she's like, well, you know, I thought nothing but death would keep him from this. And she says, well, so clearly something's going on. He's ill. Hey, he might even be dead. But she's back in the mix. She sees Bertha's sister, and she slips up while she's standing there with Mrs. Astor, and I can't remember his name now. Oh, gosh, the guy who's friends with everybody. So she says, well, you know, it's interesting. I've never met Monica. And so he turns to her like, well, why would you have? We have to remember, Bertha never let it be known that this woman was her maid or her lady in waiting or whatever you want to call it. So there's that going on. And because she hates Bertha, this information is valuable to her. And I have a feeling this is a foreshadow of what's to come. She's going to do a little bit of investigating to get the whole story and use it to bring Bertha down. Also, we recognize that Lena, Mrs. Astor, is there, and she's having her own issues. Apparently, one of her daughters has a scandal going on. She's cheating on her husband, or she's having some kind of marital issues, and it's in the paper. People are talking about it, so she's embarrassed. And she actually tells her daughter to stay home and not to come to the wedding because she's so embarrassed. So that's going on. She makes a comment and says, you know, it's interesting how, look at all of this with Bertha, the Russells. You know, her daughter is marrying nobility. But 3 years ago, we didn't even know who she was. So that, coupled with what Mrs. Winterton said and with the presence of Monica, I feel that they're priming us for a collective takedown of Bertha. Now, I don't think it's going to be successful because Bertha's crafty. She's always 2-3 steps ahead. But I think it's going to be coming at her from all these different directions. Her husband is starting to look at her sideways. Now her social circle is curious and knowing more about her background, and she might have gotten a little too high. So now she's a target. You know, Larry's not happy with her. Obviously, Gladys is pissed. So she's making a lot of enemies. I think what we're seeing is going to be the beginning of a collective effort to take Bertha down. So before I move off of Mrs. Astor, Another interesting scene was when she tells her daughter that she can't come to the wedding because of this scandal with her daughter and her son-in-law. And her daughter doesn't care. I mean, she's young and clearly she's not in a happy relationship. She doesn't seem to care about what people are saying about her. And she calls her mother out and says that, I'm not going to have the same marriage that you have, where daddy is off doing whatever he's doing, cheating on you with all these random women. And you're sitting here running around this house, worrying about your image, but you're clearly not happy. And I don't want that life. And of course, Miss Astor responds that, divorce is not an option. You need to get it together. You want to sit here. You're not coming with me. So we're starting to see a little bit of the inside of the Astor household. I don't think it's a surprise that Lena is in an unhappy marriage. A lot of those marriages at that time were, they were very much about money and image. And, high society. We see what happens to women when they get divorced, as we see what's happening with Aurora right now. So Mrs. Astor will do everything in her power to make sure that nobody knows about the state of her marriage. But it's obvious, and it's probably one of those unspoken things. We haven't seen him yet. He's never there. He's never at any event. She's always rolling with old boy, whose name I can't remember. So, she's living in that space. She's all about the smoke and mirrors, and her daughter calls her on it. So more to come on Mrs. Astor. So everybody's at the church, and people are waiting with bated breath to see the wedding. But Gladys is still up in her room. George goes up to talk to her, and this was disappointing for me because she doesn't want to do it, and all this time that she spent up there has not moved the needle at all. She's really praying for a miracle at this point. Maybe possibly praying that her father will bail her out, will keep his word, and will call this whole thing off. But he doesn't. He sits there with her and he tells her, it is what it is. It's too late at this point. I mean, George, I didn't like that scene at all. You are so powerful. How do you sit here and just say, what, it's too late, like it's out of my hands? You allowed it to get this far. And it's just sad to watch. And she knows at this point that there's really nothing else that she can do, and that this is going to be her life. And George tells her, I'm going to leave. I'll go downstairs. If you don't come down in 10 minutes, I'll send word. And we all sit here waiting. We're wondering, like, is she going to marry him? Is he going to have to call it off? What the hell is Bertha going to do? But she comes downstairs. She looks beautiful in her wedding dress. And she's obviously unhappy and sad. And as she walks down the aisle, she's crying. Through her veil, you can watch her look at everybody in the church, and she's so very sad. And, the funny part is there are several people in the audience who can see through her veil and see that she's crying and that she's upset. But her own mother, the woman who carried her for 8-9 months, is just as happy as she could be. And, when George is standing next to Bertha, he's like, this is on you. I really hope that you're right about this. And she has no concern whatsoever. She's like, well, can I have my moment? This is what she says to him. Can I have my moment? My daughter is about to become nobility. My daughter's about to become a duchess. Again, it's not about anybody else but Bertha. She's using her children as resources, and it's actually pathetic. And this is another reason why, everything she's saying, George is he's keeping tabs of all of this, and this is going to mess up her own marriage, and everything that she worked so hard to get is going to crumble because she didn't know when to say when. So Gladys marries the man. I was surprised that they left so soon. It looks like it's the same day that they get on a boat and they're going back to England. You would think, he would give, maybe a week or so, and she can kind of just get acclimated, say goodbye to her friends, but no, she is leaving, it looks like that night. And then the dude comes to her and tells her, she reminds her that she has some wifely duties, basically talking about sex. And she's like, yeah, my mother told me about it. She told me it might hurt and blah, blah, blah. And she doesn't want to. She tries to use a tactic. She's like, well, you know what? You've had a long day. Maybe we should get some rest. You can wait. He's like, no, I want to do it now. So she's about to have sex with her new husband, and she's about to go to England, and that's going to be a whole new chapter in her life. Sorry, Gladys, we were rooting for you and we were hoping that, you were going to be able to pull yourself out of the situation, but unfortunately not. So before we get to Peggy and her situation, just want to throw in a couple of smaller scenes that we watched. Ada and Agnes, those two are still fussing over money. Ada has her séance. She thinks that Agnes is going to be gone for a couple of hours, but she comes home earlier than she expected. And Agnes catches her in the house having the séance with Madame So-and-so. And of course, Agnes is livid. And she kicks the séance lady. What am I talking about? She kicks Madame So-and-so out the house. And then her and Ada start to fuss. And she tells her that Luke would not approve of this. Staying in the Van Ryn household, let's move over to Jack. So we all know that Jack is working with Larry and he's trying to sell his clock, and they strike a deal. They meet with, I believe his name was Mr. Weston, and he makes an offer. He says he doesn't want to be a partner with them. He wants to buy the product, the patent, everything, lock, stock, and barrel, and offers them $300,000. Of course, Jack's eyes light up because he didn't expect the offer and he did not expect that amount of money. But because Larry is a shrewd businessman, probably learned everything he knows from his father, George, and he holds out. He negotiates really by saying nothing. He just makes a face and looks at them like, yeah, 300 is not going to cut it. They move it to 400, then they move it to 600, and there you have it, $600,000 for the clock. And it happened so quickly that Jack is in a whirlwind. He doesn't even know what to do with himself. He thought that this was going to be a long, drawn-out process and there was going to be more to be done. But just like that, he's wealthy. And so, of course, I had to do a little bit of research to figure out what this is worth. Now, I've seen several sources. I've seen as little as 10 million and I've seen as much as 21 million. I'm not sure exactly what that $600,000 is worth, what it would be worth today in 2025. But whatever it is, whatever it falls into in that range is big money, and he is wealthy and he'll never have to work again. And I'm extremely happy for him because he's a very nice young man. I'm glad he linked up with Larry. They're going to split the money. That was the deal. And I'll be honest, I was like, damn, Larry gets $300,000 and Larry don't need it. But, got to give the man his money, because if it wasn't for him, Jack would still be tinkering around with that in the basement. He would not have known what to do next. He wouldn't have had the opportunity to meet with these businessmen. So sometimes you just got to pay for the access, and that's what he did. But still, $300,000 or $600,000, he still has more money than he knows what to do with. So that was a successful story, and I'm glad that it ended on that note. All right, so let's head up to Newport. Peggy is still in Newport visiting with family, and Phylicia Rashad and her husband. I keep calling Phylicia Rashad. I don't know what the lady's name is. I think it's Mrs. Kirkland. I don't know what her first name is. But anyway, she is curious about Peggy because her son clearly likes her, and she agrees to go to one of Peggy's speeches. Peggy gives a speech about civil rights and the woman's right to vote and blah, blah, blah. And, of course, it's a good speech. Peggy's articulate and she's intelligent and she's passionate and, she's all those things. So, his mother can't help but be impressed by her. She's not impressed by the subject matter. She's old school in that, a woman is a mother and a wife, and that's your role. And this whole thing about pushing for rights is just a little bit beyond her comprehension or her interest. But, Peggy's young and she is ambitious. And she enjoys politics. And so, she's out there giving her speech. And they meet up with Mrs. Kirkland later. She invites them back to the house. And the digs just don't stop. It's like, can't you just be quiet? First, she takes a shot at Peggy's father, saying, he's not one of them or he's not an important man. And I was happy to see Peggy's mom defend him and say he's an honorable man, he's a businessman, he's a good father, all those things, and shoots back. But none of this phases her, right? Mrs. Kirkland, let me stop calling her Phylicia Rashad. Mrs. Kirkland is not phased. She doesn't care. She's just going to keep throwing him out. But see, the thing that bothers me here is, while her husband and her son recognize that she's a bitch, and the husband does try to cover up for her, or at least try to soften the blow of her statements. He always has something nice to say on the heels of what she says, but it's not enough. And I don't know what he's doing and saying to her behind the scenes, but you got to reel her in because she's out of control and she's so disrespectful. She's got to stop. But of course she won't. One of the most, one of the shadiest things that she said is that she's curious about Peggy because whenever her son shows interest in a body, it drives her curiosity. Something to that effect. A body? I mean, dude. Yeah. And I'm just surprised that they're still going with it. I mean, because Peggy's not even officially dating this guy yet. So this whole thing of keep coming back to the well and keep getting slapped with the insults is getting tired. Like, if I was Peggy, I'm not going over there no more. Like, if he wants to see me, we can go take a walk somewhere. We can go downtown Newport. But I'm not hanging around with your mom no more. And if I was Peggy's mom, I would be like, let it go. Let it go. You have options. You're a beautiful young woman. You have a successful future ahead of you. You don't need to pin all your hopes on this man with his mama, because if you marry him, you're marrying into the family and everything that comes with it. She's never going to think that you're good enough. She's a colorist. If y'all have children, she's going to impose all of that on them. Like, there's just really no upside in this. If I was Peggy, I would pull out. And if I was her mama, I would insist that Peggy pulled out. Well, that's it for this episode. It was mostly about the wedding, which, like I said in the beginning, I was surprised that it occurred as early as it did in the season. I believed that they were going to drag it out a little bit more. I didn't even know if she was going to marry him, but she did. And looks like from the previews, we're going to see her on the other side of the pond next week or further down in the season. And all the shenanigans that come with that. So that's it. That's all I got. Let me know what you thought about the episode. Let me know what your predictions are for next week. And I will be back to review episode 5. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.